Okay, back again. All right, so the decision-making process. So let's go ahead and go on to step one here. All right, so step one, we're identifying and defining what our problem is, right? So gather the information about what the problem is. We don't want to make assumptions based off of an uneducated guess, okay? So we want to know the actual problem and what is our goal at the end of this? Like when we resolve this problem, what is our preferred outcome? Okay, what are we trying to accomplish? So something to consider when you're trying to go through this decision-making process is there are some common mistakes. A lot of the times, either we look at a problem too broadly and there's too much we're trying to take in. Or sometimes we try and narrow it down too much and we're not actually considering the entire problem. We're just thinking about like maybe a symptom of that problem, which leads me to the next part. Sometimes we're focusing on just the symptoms and we're not actually looking into and delving into the actual facts that give us the actual cause instead of just the outcome of what the result is from the problem. So then that leads right into the last one as well. We're focusing on the wrong problem. If we're focusing on a symptom and not what's actually causing the problem to begin with, if we're not looking back far enough at the cause, we're focusing on the wrong problem and our solution is going to be like a band-aid, or maybe not even that, may not even work at all. So we really need to try and consider gathering all the facts, all the information so we can make a good decision. All right, so then moving on to the second one, we are evaluating different options. There are so many different choices that we can make, right? Some of them might be squiggly lines that lead us all over the place. Some of them might be a direct shot to our goal. So whatever the case may be, we really need to consider who's involved. We talked about before what stakeholders means. So think about those stakeholders. Who's involved? Who is this decision going to affect? Who's being affected by the problem right now? Are different alternatives going to affect additional or fewer people? Is that a problem? So think about those kind of things. And then so that's just in general when you're making decisions, but also consider for your company or your organization, whoever you're working with, think about the costs that your different decisions could lead to. Think about like how long is this going to take? Is this something you have the time to generate an answer for, or is this something that needs to happen a little quicker? Does that matter? Is it going to be accepted by those that you're giving the solution to? So if the solution's not accepted, it is not going to solve the problem. So if you're working with a team and you're the team lead and you come up with a decision and nobody on that team agrees with your decision, or maybe you didn't, consult them on your decision, it's highly unlikely that it is going to be successful. So, and then lastly, also consider, again, going back to our ethics, thinking about the ethical repercussions of our decisions. So, all right, so step 3, we're going into so we've thought about our different courses of action. Now let's pick one. Which one do we go with? And there's so many different ways to make that decision as well. So many different things we have to consider. A lot of it is what we did on step 2, but we're actually narrowing down and looking at the evidence of our one particular decision. So really kind of honing in on one decision and evaluating that one decision thoroughly. So then we implement our decision. We act on whatever it is we decided, lay down that puzzle piece that needs to fit in there. Something, like I mentioned before, an error that can really occur in a lot of decisions that have been made is when those affected have not been included in the process. Whether it's been, just letting them know that, hey, I'm having to work on this decision, just FYI, there's going to be a change coming about. Or if it's maybe you should have gotten their opinion first or their foresight. Again, that goes back to the first step of gathering information. If you haven't gathered all the facts by talking to those that are in the middle of this process, that can really give you some errors along the way. Okay. And then finally, evaluate your results. What happened? Was it successful? Do you need to reevaluate? Was your objective, your goal from step one, was it met? And then this might consist of you getting some feedback from other people. So you may have to go around and kind of ask some constituents, maybe ask your clients, whoever is involved in this, kind of getting their feel for how is this going? Is this resolving it? Do we need to reevaluate and start, maybe start back at step 3 and think about more decisions? Anyway, so that's the steps 1 through 5 of decision making, based on the way our book evaluates decision making. Okay. So back to those ethical reasonings. So just like I said, the ethical piece of this, ideally, the ethics is going to become second nature. But if we don't consciously think about it when we're practicing these, it's gonna be harder to think about them when we're actually in a critical situation. So thinking about these or making a conscious effort to think about these critical reasonings during your decision makings that maybe don't have quite a big of an impact or don't impact many other people can really help to make it second nature, so that you're already thinking about these things, in the back of your mind while you're making decisions for a company or for others. So I don't want to necessarily read them to you. You guys can read these. So just think about these. These all align well with the ethical reasonings. They don't have the same names. The book decided not to use the same names. I don't know why, but anyway. So same concepts though. Thinking about rights, thinking about what is just, thinking about others and how it impacts them, different things like that. Okay. All right, that should lead us into, oh yeah, sorry, I forgot about crisis. So the book does make a note to mention crisis decision-making, and I do agree that it can be an important piece of this. So really you follow the same decision-making process, it's just sped up. You have to do it in a timely manner, because what's considered a crisis decision is when something unexpected happens. And it could be extremely bad if it continues, or if like the problem actually occurs, maybe you found it ahead of time and it needs to be handled in a timely manner. And so these are just 6 things that your book kind of talks about thinking about. And if you have the PowerPoint up, I put some comments in the notes section of my PowerPoint so that you can kind of see through these a little bit more. I don't want to take up too much time of your guys' time, because I know these videos are going to probably kind of drag on because you're not here to have a discussion. So I'm just here talking. But anyway, so just kind of thinking about, again, what's actually going on. Remember that speed does matter. But number 3, they kind of counter each other. However, it makes sense if you think about the fact that you don't want to make instant decisions that you haven't actually had some time to think through. You do want to take what time you do need to think through, is this actually a good decision that I'm making? So although it does need to be timely, do take what time you can to actually think through your decisions and not just necessarily gut reactions. And then so when in a crisis situation, sometimes you don't have time to find every single fact. And so you have to be respectful of the fact that there's going to be some things that you just may not know, because you don't have the time to dig in and find it out. So just respect that there's going to be some unfamiliar pieces to what's happening. And maybe you can work those out later, but in order to make your decision and resolve the disaster now, is going to be very important. And then if you are working with others, or maybe you have some skepticism yourself on some things, don't just dismiss that. Consider those thoughts too, or consider other people's thoughts about what's happening as well, because it could be that they have some insight that you don't, or maybe your brain is trying to tell you something that you maybe didn't quite think of the first go around. So don't just dismiss skepticism, kind of take that into consideration. Again, going back to rule 2 and 3, you kind of have a timeline that you got to play with, but don't ignore that there may be kind of an issue. And the number 6, I feel like, is probably the most confusing one. I do like the way the book introduces it, but basically my understanding for what they're trying to say for number 6 is that sometimes others don't see a problem coming up, or a problem that's you would think maybe is right in front of their faces. They don't have the same viewpoint as you do necessarily. They have a different job, maybe they have some other perspective, they have something else distracting them. Whatever the case may be, they may not always see the problem. And I'm not saying that you should put gasoline on the fire and make it flare up more by any means, but sometimes you have to bring that fire to their face, like give them the evidence that this is an issue and it is a crisis. We need to resolve this now. We don't have time to wait for this to become a forest fire. We need to fix the bonfire right now. So anyway, so think about the fight fire with fire in that fashion. Okay. All right. That should wrap up chapter 4 for us. So we are going to go ahead and go to chapter 5, which is the planning piece of things and thinking about our planning techniques. Planning, as hopefully you know by now, is a major function of management. Like that's a huge piece of it. And decision making falls within the planning scope. So we just talked about decision making. And so I guess I should kind of reverse that. Planning is a piece of decision making. So when you're making your decision about how you're going to react to something, you have to come up with a plan. That is one of our like scenario things, right? So step 4, we need to act on a plan. So when we are actually planning things out, we need to kind of think about, we can kind of think about this in a step process as well. And just like I mentioned before on ethics, this stuff can become second nature for you. And a lot of you do this for all kinds of things in your lives now. You just don't think about it. So ideally, when a bigger situation, a bigger problem comes up, or something that you need to plan for, maybe an opportunity comes up, you can step back and actually, instead of panicking about it, step back and go, okay, I've made decisions before. I've made plans before. I just need to figure out how to tackle this, right? So step 1, define your objectives. What is your goal? What are you going to end up with? Just like we talked about on decision making, what are we wanting to end with? Where are we wanting this to go? Then determine where you stand. So when I think about that one, a big piece, and usually what I would have you do in class is we would maybe kind of think of like a goal for yourself, just a small goal. And so this would be a great time to do that if you want. Think about a goal for yourself and where do you stand in progress of that goal? So what I mean by that is, how much have you accomplished already? So how close to that goal are you? What do you still have in front of you? So that's kind of like, what's the gap? What are you still missing to meet that goal? What are your resources to help you achieve that goal? So what are some things out there that are really going to kind of help you get to that point? If, for example, if you are looking for a job, you're working on your degree, you still have some classes left to get your degree. You maybe have some company contacts, but you don't have a job secured yet. So these are some of our steps that we've made progress, but we still have some gaps. So some resources, you have got your faculty. They can be great connections for you. You've got career services here on campus. They can do resumes for you and they can do mock interviews for you. Different things like that. You've got the internet is a huge source. Like there's so many companies out there. You can learn so much about them. You can just all day long just look at different companies and crap like that. So the internet is also a resource for you. Just all these different things. And then also consider roadblocks. So for step 2 is there could be roadblocks in your way. It could be that maybe your ideal job is open now, but you have to have a bachelor's degree for it and they won't budge on that. So that's kind of an obstacle in your way. You don't have that bachelor's degree yet. So that's kind of a minor obstacle to think about. But anyway, you kind of get the idea. All right, going on to step 3. This is where our decision-making piece comes into play. So we talked about decision-making as a problem-solving piece, but decision-making is not just about resolving problems. Decision-making is literally just everything we do. When you got up this morning and decided what you were going to put on, or maybe not put on if you're in your PJs still right now. But anyway, so it's this, step 3 is about that decision-making piece. Consider our various scenarios and what are we going to decide to do? And then number 4, we're actually going to implement and like take a piece of that plan, or take one of those scenarios, take one of those scenarios and act on it. So we are actually going to step forward in making that plan. And then just like before, you're going to hear this from me like throughout the semester when we talk about different steps like this, when we are working through something, it always comes back to evaluating your results. Once you implement that plan, what was the result of that? Like what came out of it? Was it good? Did you meet your goal? How short were you? Did you overstretch? Maybe you should make higher goals in the future if you kind of overstretched your goal. So anyway, where do you stand? And do you need to reevaluate and make a new objective? Okay. So I'm not going to read all these to you, but planning is a piece of, or time management is a piece of planning. You've got to have time management skills. And the more that you consciously go through the planning process and go through the steps, the more you're going to improve your time management skills. I don't know about all of you. I struggle with time management myself. So again, just like I mentioned before, ideally, as you consciously are thinking through plans and decision making, you're going to more so get the concept down, the steps down, and be able to subconsciously do that, which again improves that time management piece. And, you know, what's a priority out of what I'm trying to do? What needs to be accomplished first? Is there an order to things? You know, different things like that. So you're really keeping yourself, if you're truly planning and pursuing a goal, you're going to have to work on that time management piece. Okay, so some other kind of pieces that come along with planning is you've got the short, I'm sure you guys have heard this in multiple classes. You've got short range planning, so short-term planning. You know, in business, you typically think about it like within a year or less. And then long-term planning, you're usually thinking kind of maybe like 3 years. Some people might say 5 years and out. So those are kind of like the two different time ranges that people usually consider. Obviously there's a gap there, so there is a middle term kind of in there as well, but these are typically the two things that are most considered in a planning process. Is it a short-term plan? Is it a goal that's short-term, or is it a long-term thing and you've got something that like you're working towards? So if somebody wants to be the president of the United States, that is a long-term goal because there are so many things that you have to accomplish and be recognized for. We're not going to get into politics about what that means, but you have to be a recognized person of society in order to do that, in whatever fashion that comes as. Anyway, so yeah, so those are the differences there for the different like planning horizons. And then thinking about strategic versus operational. So, you know, if it's something that you are thinking of long-term, you usually are trying to be more strategic and like putting pieces in place, kind of like chess, where you have to strategize and put pieces in place to make your long-term goal of checkmate and a reality. But operational plans are usually going to be more short-term, and they're the pieces that you do to build up to that strategic plan. So again, it's kind of that long-term, short-term. You have several short-term goals to reach that long-term goal. Okay. I know you guys have probably heard this all the time, so I guess if you want to speed me up, you can. All right, so some other types of plans that have to do with corporations. There might be policy plans. I've had to do this multiple times in my job as the director. You have to update guidelines and policies. And then once those policies are updated, does that affect your procedures and how you implement those policies? And so then you might have to update those too. Again, I've had to do that multiple times. Once I updated the certification handbook, I had to then go and check, okay, what policies had changed? How does this affect how we go about achieving our goals, different things like that. And then there may also be budgeting. Well, almost all companies, actually all companies, you know what, just all companies have a budgeting plan. They've got to have a plan for their budget. That's what a budget is planning for your finances. So anyway. And then the last little bit here, just goal setting in general. We will come back to goal setting. Some of you have maybe heard of SMART goals. I think there's another one that's called like DIP or something like that. I can't remember, but there's several different ways to go about goal setting. And I've talked about this like both of these videos, but goal setting, if we think about like the process now in our forefront of our mind, ideally it should become secondary nature to set goals moving forward in the future. And we don't have to use the SMART acronym that we have to go through every single thing and talk about our specifics and our measurements and attainability and whether it's relevant and whether it's in a timely manner and all those different things. Hopefully it just kind of becomes a second nature for you. But I do think this can be a good resource if you have a hard time setting goals or achieving goals, if you're not doing some of these things where you're being more specific and you are giving yourself a time frame. So that is actually why homework typically has deadlines, is because if we're thinking about it from a goal standpoint, you have a measuring system, you have the rubric. It should be attainable unless your instructor is cruel. No, just kidding. Anyway, you have a timeline, you have a due date of when it's due. It should be relevant. I don't like busy work. If it can be avoided, I do not like busy work. So it should be relevant to what is happening and what you're trying to learn. And then there should be specific outcomes. So those are objectives. On our syllabus, we have course objectives. This is what I want you to have, all of you. I want you to have those objectives by the end of this class. So that's the idea, that's the concept. So anyway, hopefully that can kind of pull this together for you about like our goal setting piece and how that aligns with our planning and also how that aligns with our decision-making processes. So that all being said, last thing I want you guys to do or to consider is take a moment. Wow, I really messed up path there. That should be our path. Anyway, so think about your personality results that you had gotten. I'd love for you to do this with your team, but if you're not able to do it with your team, that is completely understandable. You can absolutely do it on your own. How does your personality come out in the way you plan, in the way you make decisions, in what goals you set for yourself, or maybe for your company if you're working for somebody? Think about your personality results and what did it say about you that you agreed with, and how is that implemented into your life? You know, like in these goals, what are you planning? What are your goals for yourself? You know, does your personality make a difference? Do we all just plan our same concepts? Do we all make same decisions? Obviously, we don't all make the same decisions. Otherwise, we would all be the same person. But anyway, so think about that. How is your personality, your personality that you got from the 16 personalities? How is that affecting what you do? Okay. All right. That's the last thing I want you to do. So that is the end of the presentation here. Just real quick, if we go over to Blackboard. So I have not gotten week 5 up yet. It's pretty close to being ready. And if you are still wanting to submit the extra credit from last week with your team, you can still do that. Go under, it says class decision and materials. You go under that section, and right here, the very bottom one says ethical, unethical behavior today. So examples from today. And it's the up to 5 extra credit points. And you just go into this. It is a whole Word doc that I just want you to put your information in. Okay. Whatever your group had come up with, put it in there. And there are additional instructions in case you forgot what I had mentioned. Oh, good. Some people have them on here. In case you had forgotten, there are instructions on here as well. So for you to follow. Okay. So if you have anything else, I am super afraid I will not be able to have much internet access out at my house. So I don't think email is going to be very useful for you guys during this snow crap that's going to happen. So please text me. Okay. 660-429-9392. So text me if you need something. I should still be able to call. So if it's something you need help, like walking through or something like that, please give me a call. So for your 5 points of participation for this week's Wednesday, so for your participation this week, all I want you to do is just email me, the deekman@ucmo.edu, email me like some responses to the questions. Doesn't have to be all of them. Just give me some thoughts on decision-making and planning from chapter 4 and 5 based on what I had talked about here today. Okay. So since we weren't able to have a discussion in class, just give me some of your thoughts. That's all I'm asking you to do. Okay. So email me with those thoughts. I'd really like to have them by Friday night, but I understand that sometimes snow can be a pain in the rear and weather can really make some things tricky. So if you need until Sunday night, that is okay as well. Okay. All right. If you guys need anything, you just let me know.